Uh, Today we're going to talk about 2 Corinthians 12, and I am Deanna. So when the chapter begins, it starts talking about visions 14 years ago, and it's talking, whoever's writing the book, which we know is Paul, is talking in the third person about this. So who is Paul talking about? Nina? Himself.
Yeah.
Thank you. And why do you think Paul is talking about himself in the third person?
Ralph?
Renee?
Yeah, because he doesn't want to pretend that he just, what's the word in English? Boasting about himself, that, so he want to be humble while trying to present everything he done for the gospel.
Yes, so he does not want to boast about himself. And the Corinthians themselves were boasting about themselves oftentimes when they had visions and revelations at that time. When I was doing a study on enduring word, which is something I reference a lot when I'm putting these studies together, it was talking about a lot of different visions that happen in the New Testament. And so I'm just going to read through some of them. And then it'll kind of give you an idea of how, I don't know if you want, common is a great word, but it's not like it's a one-time thing for one person. So it gives an example of Zechariah, the father of John the Baptist, who had a vision of an angel in Luke. It talked about Jesus's transfiguration being described for the disciples as a vision in Matthew 17:9. The women who went to visit Jesus's tomb in the vision of the angels in Luke. Stephen saw a vision of Jesus at his death in Acts. Ananias experienced a vision telling him to go to Saul in Acts. Peter had a vision of the clean and unclean animals in Acts. Peter had a vision of an angel at his release from prison. And those are just some of them. There's a longer list of that, which you could definitely take a peek at, but I thought that was very interesting as well, because like the Corinthians were kind of boasting about it in a way where like they were seeing that and it was extremely special for them. But one thing that it mentioned that was very important in the chapter also is that those visions were for those individuals, not for them to like kind of cast their thoughts on what that meant for others. So I thought that was interesting as well. So in the chapter, it also talks about the third heaven. Do you know what they're referring to by saying the third heaven? Does Tio Ralph have his hand up too? Because I can't see him. Okay, go ahead, Tio Ralph.
That's where the God and the angels live.
Yeah, so when they're talking about the third heaven, they're referring to where God lives, and they call the first heaven being the blue sky and the second heaven as being the starry sky when they're referencing it in that. And what did Paul see when he was in heaven? We're going to give this question to Tio Eddie.
Things that are, it's not proper for a man to speak of. So he must have seen the glory of God.
Titi?
He said he heard.
Thank you. That was a trick question. He didn't see anything or talk about what he saw. He simply said that
inexpressible things.
He heard inexpressible things that no one was permitted to tell. And the chapter is labeled about Paul's thorn. So what was Paul's thorn in his side, Abel?
That nobody, there's no explanation for it, that nobody really knows what the will of God is in this, because it's like there's no explanation of it. It's not of man to know.
Go ahead, Tio Eddie.
Well, even though it doesn't specify, it does say that he had a problem with the eyes. Not in this chapter, but in another chapter. He explains it, and historians are talking about that. I don't know how you say lagaña, just in Spanish, in English, lagaña.
I think it's cataracts. It's like he had cataracts.
That he will get boogers in his eye. That's what the historian said. And I don't know if you guys have met people that have something like that. In Dominican, we do. you know, it's very nasty because
Probably conjunctivitis.
they have to
Yeah,
keep cleaning
That's all
the
it
eye.
Well, he takes it right, yeah. Big guy, yeah.
Jesse, did you raise your hand before, or was that Brandon?
Renee.
Oh, okay, go ahead, Tio Renee.
But it must have been something worse because he had it all the time. It's like prayed 3 times to God. So it was an ailment that it was constantly with him and he was in pain in a sense because he said, I have prayed 3 times to God and God.
Wait. You're telling too much.
Okay.
Hold that part.
Keep going.
You're going on the right path there to tell more of this story, but we're gonna wait on that because there's questions related to that. But there is no full definition of that, but some people, as Eddie mentioned, think that it's a physical ailment. When the scholars are talking about it, he often mentions that he had headaches and earaches. Some people thought that it might actually be malaria, which causes headaches. They also thought that it could be someone or people giving spiritual harassment to him. And then there was another area which said it might be that he has trouble basically controlling himself around things that are lustful. But those are all different variations that different scholars has thought that what Paul's thorn was in his actual side. But we will never know exactly what it was, but we can make some assumptions that it could be related to the ailment. So Tio Renee, we'll let you answer this question since you started talking about it, but what was God's response to Paul's 3 requests to rid this thorn in his life?
He said, my grace is sufficient.
Yeah.
God said to him.
Yeah.
And he said, you know, when in the time of weakness, that's when my grace is sufficient.
Yes, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness, was his response. And the important thing there is that we have to learn is that we might be asking God for something in our lives, and he might not answer us exactly the way we want to, right? Like Paul would have liked, I think at that point, right? That's why he was praying for it over and over for God to take it away. But God's response was not to just take it away, but to answer him in a different way and tell him the importance of that in his life. Yes?
Yes, I wanted to say that, you know, I always pray to God, oh God, please heal my knee. And today I said, well, maybe your grace is sufficient. Maybe that's why you don't want to heal it. He has the power to heal it, but you know.
Yes, Tio Eddie.
Let me ask something. When Jesus called Paul to serve him, he said something to him. He said that he didn't know how much he would suffer because of him and the gospel. So this is part of it. Not only he was almost given to death like 3 different times, but also he never stopped suffering physically. But as you guys know, also Paul was not an angel before he converted to Christ.
Right.
He was a killer. He was an assassin. Actually, that was his job, to persecute us and kill us.
But there was a commander.
He was a killer. He
he
was there. In matter of fact, the Bible specified that when they killed Stephen in chapter 7 of Acts that you referenced, his clothes was laid at the feet of Paul.
He used to go and get the Christian, round them up, bring them to Jerusalem and have them killed.
I have a question, but when you said that Jesus told him that he would suffer for being a Christian, Jesus told Paul.
Yes.
Did they? I didn't even know they met.
Oh yeah, but you know
Yes,
what?
in
He
the
liked.
vision.
Oh, in the vision.
Yeah, Jesus.
Okay.
It was God. That's why he said, Jesus.
Who are you? When he asked,
Paul, why you persecuting me? So Jesus was in appeared to him, but in spirit and through a light.
All right. So after we talk about that portion, Paul is talking about his visit to the Corinthian church. This will be his 3rd visit, and he keeps iterating that he's not going to be a burden to the Corinthians. Anyone have an idea why that might be? Anyone besides Tio Eddie? Brandon, go ahead.
Are the Corinthians accusing him for pocketing money or something along those lines? And he doesn't want to be there. He's not really happy to be there. He's getting accused of that.
Yes, but who does he consider himself to the Corinthians? Like
Like a father. It's
a
spiritual.
father, yes.
Yes.
So
He
it
said
talks
later
it
on
talks specifically about, you can share yours in a minute. Sorry, I kept cutting you off on accident. He's their spiritual father, and it talks in verses in that chapter about parents should store money for their children. Children should not take care of their parents, right? And so it's talking in there about how he considers himself as a spiritual father for these Corinthians. So he doesn't want them to think that he's coming there just to get their money, which is kind of going in line with what you were saying there, Brandon. And he wants to ensure that it's clear that he's only coming there to help them grow. And Paul does take money from other churches, right? Like the Philippians and stuff, but those churches are more, I think that was it. You made a face, so maybe I said that wrong, but that he knows that church has grown, and they're capable of giving that to him, right? But the Corinthians are still like his children that he's still developing and growing in the spirit. So once they become mature enough, perhaps then he would allow that. But at this point, he still feels very much like he's their spiritual father. Did I say that wrong, Eddie?
No. What I want to say is that Paul and Jesus always worked in the ministry. They give an example from that I decided to always work and not be a burden. It's Paul always worked. He used to build tents and sell it as he would go to places. And Jesus, as you know, was a carpenter that never was a burden on nobody. So they both always worked.
And what was Paul afraid that he was going to find when he got there on his third visit? Titi, do you know?
He was gonna find like impurity, sexual sin, and debauchery.
Yes, so he was afraid he was going to find the Corinthians in the same state that they were originally in. And then that would be upsetting to both him and them based off of how he would respond to that. So originally they were jealous, they were doing a lot of gossip, they were very arrogant, they were participating in sexual activities and so forth. So he was just making it known that he was afraid that he was going to find that. So the key takeaways in this chapter, which one is a recurring theme in Corinthians, which is do not boast. We have to be very humble in what we're saying. And we don't want to come across about bragging and boasting. And then the second main one for this chapter is based off of the thorn, which is that God's power is made perfect in our weakness. And that's all. Any questions?
No?
Yes.
I just wanted to say that that's just what happened before is just an example of what goes today. You get a holy leader that go to help the churches and they end up criticizing him instead of praising him for all the work that he does. So whatever 2,000 years ago, what was happening, what is happening always, that your brothers and sisters will try to criticize you and crucify you and put you down. No matter what.
Public is ungrateful.
Yes, yes.